Our visiting speaker will give this evening's Dhamma talk. And while everyone is getting themselves comfortable and the latecomers are coming in, just a few words about Ajahn Nyanadhammo. He was born in Adelaide, and I remember some of the stories he told me about his early life. The one I remember was when Gough Whitlam got kicked out of being Prime Minister by the Governor John Kerr. I think John Kerr visited Adelaide University, and he was one of the chief student activists. Almost got himself arrested by ASIO. But having protested for the freedom of democracy, then he started protesting for the freedom of the heart when he went over to Thailand to become a monk with Ajahn Chah. First of all, he actually became a monk in the south of Thailand, I think a novice monk, and then he found Ajahn Chah. And he's been a monk now for 27 or 28 years. 27 years as a monk. So that's, well, I was going to say longer than many of you have been born, but I look around me and say, no. It'd be nice if that's the case. So 27 years as a monk, and many of those years, 8 years here, a very good monk, very, very popular in Thailand, and now he's going on a tour of Australia for a month, teaching in many countries, but he starts off here in Perth to share the Dhamma with us, and a wonderful teacher, and again in charge of many monks, 3 or 4 monasteries over in Thailand, and very well worthwhile listening to. So I introduced Ajahn Nyanadhammo to give a talk on the Dhamma on whatever subject he likes this evening. Here you are, Ajahn.
Thank you for the introduction to Ajahn Brahm. So I will begin the talk by the traditional Buddhist chanting of paying respects to the Buddha, the Noble One, the Enlightened One, fully enlightened by himself. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Sanghaṃ Namasāmi. Now this evening I really didn't plan a talk to give to you. I thought, well, whatever comes up. And from Ajahn Brahmawangsa's introduction to me a few moments ago, he spoke about seeking freedom for democracy and then deciding that that wasn't the way and it's better to seek freedom within oneself. I thought that I would carry on that theme about seeking freedom within oneself. Many years ago, before I actually went to stay with Ajahn Chah, there was a Western monk who became a very famous writer much later on, who his name was Jack Hornfield, and he became a monk with Ajahn Chah. And when he went to Ajahn Chah's monastery, he found it very difficult because it was so regimented. We all shaved our heads, we all wore the same coloured robes, we had the same bowls, we went on alms round at exactly the same time, we got up at the same time in the morning, we did chores all together. And he had been a hippie before coming to a monastery, and had an idea of freedom being doing what you want, when you want, how you want, at all times. And so he felt very frustrated. And he said that one night he had a dream where he took his monk's bowl, simple plain monk's bowl, and painted Technicolor colours all over the monk's bowl, and tie-dyed his robe. And he woke up in a hot sweat because he thought he'd be in trouble by Ajahn Chah. And so he walked off to Ajahn Chah's hut and thought, this is just too much. I'm too restricted with all these particular rules of training and all these ways of doing things together with all the monks. I want some space. And he went to Ajahn Chah and said, look, these regiment rules are not the way. I think we need more freedom, more space to do what we want, when we want, how we want. And Ajahn Chah looked at him and said, see if you can find a more profound state of freedom than that. And those words just knocked all his thoughts out of his head. He was completely taken back and stilled by that. Because then Ajahn Chah said, do you think that real freedom is just getting what you want, how you want, and when you want it? You've done that in your life to a certain degree, and has it brought you real freedom? Maybe there's a more profound state of freedom than that. And he was so taken back by that, he went back to his kuti and he realized that actually, yes, it's not just doing what we want or following our desires that brings us freedom, because we've, in our own life experience, have all noticed that actually sometimes that doesn't bring us freedom, it brings us problems, difficulties, enjoyment sometimes, pleasures, but consequences as a result of those pleasures. And maybe there is a higher state, a more profound state of freedom than following desire. And that brought him back to the fundamental teachings of the Buddha, which was that yes, there is a state of freedom, which he called enlightenment, nibbana, liberation, and that isn't achieved through following desire, but through the cultivation of overcoming desire and abandoning desire. Then that real freedom can be obtained. And that real freedom is through developing body, speech and mind as a pathway. And the profundity of the Buddha's teachings that I found in my life, when people ask me, what really brought you to Buddhism? What was the thing? And especially in Thailand, people see you as a Western monk, brought up in a Western culture, not brought up as a Buddhist, and then coming to discover Buddhism and then becoming a monk. They say, well, what brought you to Buddhism? And I always give the response that really the one thing that struck me, that brought me to Buddhism, was the Noble Eightfold Path. Because in the Buddha's teachings, as we know, he taught this, the first noble truth, the noble truth that life is basically unsatisfactory because it's always changing. Doesn't matter how pleasurable it will get, that pleasure will change and disappear. And I tend to simplify that definition, that life is unsatisfactory, as saying life is problematic. Because when we hear that life is suffering or dukkha or unsatisfactory, it gets a bit abstruse. But when we say that life is problematic, we can start to see that yes, as soon as we wake up in the morning, there's a problem there. Do we get up or do we, turn on the snooze button? Ajahn Brahm gave me an alarm clock and I noticed there's a big snooze button there. He says it's compassion. I say that's indulgence. He should ban all snooze buttons on his monks' clocks in his monastery. And we see that there's immediate problem there. When we get up, there's the problems of taking care of the body, brushing the teeth, combing the hair if you've got any, and just cleaning up the body, preparing it for the day, then feeding the body, then putting the body to work in useful employment so that you can keep this life going. And all the problems and difficulties that go with employment, work, the boss, the employees, then relatives and friends, problems of loved ones, the problems of money and economy, the problems of health and well-being, all the problems of life that come through the door to us. So life is about having a strategy, a skillful strategy for overcoming problems. And having a skillful strategy for overcoming problems is where wisdom comes into life. How wise we are will reflect in our skillful strategy for dealing with the problems of life, dealing with the dukkha of life, so to speak, in Pali. And this dealing with the problems of life is how we tackle the first noble truth, the noble truth of change, creating unsatisfactoriness, problems. The second noble truth is, the Buddha pointed out, as we know, that there is a cause for problems, and that is our desires. Someone asked me, how long are you staying here in Perth? And I said, I will be staying till Wednesday. And they immediately said, that's not long enough. And my response was the response that Ajahn Chah would give. Is the piece of string too long or too short? If I have a piece of string this long, and you want a piece of string longer than this, then it's too short. If you want a piece of string shorter than this, then it's too long. The problem is not the piece of string, it's what you want. So how long I'm staying in Perth is not a problem unless you want more or less. Some people might want less. When I told the people in Thailand I was going to be away for a month, they said, that's too long. So we can see that it's what we desire. So that is the cause of problems. That's where our problems and difficulties are sourced from, is because of our either wanting it to be longer or shorter, and better or worse, come or go, to have or to get rid of. So that wanting and rejecting causes problems. And then, of course, the Buddha said, there's a utopia, there's Nibbana. Now, for myself, when I came across Buddhism, it sounded a wonderful thing, Nibbana, and it's certainly desirable, but it is far from our experience here and now, and it is something to aspire to, but it is distant. It's not something yet that we have experienced or can directly know when we certainly begin. And most religions offer you a utopia. So that didn't really grab me. But the thing that grabbed me about Buddhism was that he taught a strategy to realize that utopia of freedom, the Noble Eightfold Path. And it was that strategy that was presented very systematically and very clearly that grabbed me, because I thought, well, if he's saying that this is what he did to realize freedom, and he's saying that if you follow these procedures, this strategy, you too can realize freedom, then that is something I can put to use. That's something I can try, that's an experiment that I can repeat. So that is what got me hooked. So when people ask what brought you to Buddhism, it's that, the strategy in life for overcoming all problems and leading to that freedom. And the Buddha taught that there is freedom to be found through the Noble Eightfold Path, and he divided that up into basically three things. That is virtue, the path of virtue, the path of meditation, and the path of wisdom. So the 8 steps are divided up into those three basic categories. And the area of virtue is a strategy for becoming a more kind, skillful, compassionate person. And we can see that as a strategy for overcoming problems, it actually does reduce problems, which just intellectually we can understand that. If people in this world, say, had the virtue of harmlessness and non-killing, non-violence, didn't steal from each other, there wasn't sexual exploitation, and people were honest in their speech and had integrity in their speech, truthfulness, and then were sober and clarity in their minds, then a lot of worldly problems would fade away. So just intellectually we can see the strategy of virtue is a life strategy worthy of taking up, which will overcome many problems socially and also in our own states of existence, our own experience. Our lives will become more peaceful,